You also say when you talk about ADHD, um, this kind of recognition that awareness isn't some capacity that we kind of exercise and grow. Awareness is kind of there and just kind of effortless. When it's like in meditation, I think it's really when we're not distracted, it doesn't take effort for things to arise in consciousness, right? And
Hmm.
there's also this similar thing I think you talk about with loving kindness meditation, where once you lose the sense of essence, there is a compassionate tone to the mind that has a similar just kind of effortlessness.
Yeah. Now, loving kindness meditation it's different from kind of garden variety mindfulness meditation in that there's a conscious, it's a little more programmed, and you start out like trying to feel compassion toward yourself, and then maybe towards someone who's benefited you from a friend, or and you go all the way to the end where you get to like, now think about an enemy and feel compassion toward them. For me, loving kindness meditation has not worked spectacularly, and there are a number of people like me, I know. Just I think maybe the trouble comes at the beginning where I'm supposed to think nice thoughts about myself or something. But in any event, and I also think I resist the programmatic nature of it, kind of. But as you suggested, I do I can be led toward compassion in what, I don't know whether I should call it a more roundabout way or a more straightforward way, but it is through meditation, and it is yeah, letting just the sense of essence dropping out. So like I had an experience on a retreat where the person who maybe is among my two or three most bitter enemies in the world, I maintain entirely because of things he's done, but opinions may vary. And I mean, I really ordinarily think of this person as something like a monster. And but I suddenly, while meditating, had this view of him like in junior high. And you can sometimes you can kind of get a sense for what people were like in junior high, like gangly unathletic people were gangly and athletic. And you know what that's in junior high, right? That's not good. Right? Because that's like on the playground, nobody's picking you first. And so you may develop other ways of attaining status. And I don't know, just all of a sudden, this person's story made sense to me, and I didn't have ill will toward them in that moment. And I think, and this is a funny thing about meditation I don't really understand. Okay, it's like once the sense of essence drops out, why wouldn't your attitude towards something just be indifference? You don't care about it one way or the other, rather than compassion. And similarly, once essence of weed drops out, why wouldn't that be indifference instead of beauty, right? Which is what it is. I mean, on meditation retreat, all kinds of things can start to seem incredibly beautiful, and I don't have a good explanation for that, but it does seem to be the case that when you relax the judgments that normally frame our perceptions and thoughts, what tends to grow, and other people report this. I'm not saying it would be the case for everyone or all the time, but what tends to grow is compassion and the sense of beauty, rather than just kind of defaulting toward a state of complete indifference toward things.
Yeah, I find the thing you're pointing to be one of the most thrilling things in this area, which is also why I think the word spiritual is appropriate, because it is the case. Yeah, I think with more clear seeing comes this sense of beauty, or but also, yeah, some kind of loving, compassionate quality. And the detached ego science person kind of in me says, well, how does that work? What's the mechanism of that? How, where's that kind of loving feeling coming from? Give me some explanation. But then I think when I've experienced those states, it feels absolutely like it makes sense. It's kind of, again, it's a kind of wordless experience, but there's a feeling of, well, how else am I supposed to feel? Like, why else would I feel anything other than perfect peace
Well,
and
it also makes sense in the sense that, like, of course, all the negative feelings I had about this person had to do with my own particular place in the world. And the fact that we both were vying for the same job or the same mate, or this person, you know, evaluated my status as not so high and treated me with disrespect, as in fact everyone does. Everyone makes judgments about the relative status of people and pays more attention to others, and I just happen to be on the losing end of this deal, and so I developed this judgment that feels as if it's really an objectively valid judgment of this person. So and this, kind of gets back to the argument I'm making in the book, in the evolutionary psychology and the psychology of it is, I think you're right. I mean, I agree with you that it just feels like there's just this intuitive feeling that, oh, this is the truth. Things are beautiful. People don't deserve to be hated, because even horrible people, well, this gets back to a logical explanation of why it makes sense, not an intuitive one, but yeah, there's just it just does feel like the truth. But I also, in the book, I try to argue that this intuition is defensible. That if you think about things clearly, everyone, I think everyone does deserve compassion in a sense. We're all born into weird, I had this experience on retreat with a lizard, and I think same retreat, and I look down, there's this lizard, and you see that it's like seeing me and kind of like wondering what to do. It freezes. It's like trying to make sense. It knows that there's this big thing there. And I thought, on the one hand, this seems like this incredibly simple, crude organism. It's completely programmed, and it's simple algorithm governing its behavior. On the other hand, there's probably a perspective from which I look at the exact same way, right? You can imagine an intelligence great that people like you and me don't seem so complicated. And in any event, we're all, at any moment, the product of the unfolding of a genetic program as influenced by the environment, and I don't, it's just like, there but for the grace of God go I. Whenever I see anybody who does something horrible, it's like, I guess if I were born in their shoes, I'd be about where they were.
Yeah, I think that's really tied up with the sense of recognizing the self to be an illusion as well, the sense of a permanent identity. When you actually drop that and you think, well, actually, there's humans on this planet and they're all kind of equals. And sure, I claim to be this one, but there's, there's some equality between all of them. I think that's where you can get into a kind of, maybe a logical explanation as to why you would have feeling of compassion for others, because you intuitively, we all have probably maybe the simplest thing in our minds is a feeling of good or bad, flourishing versus suffering. And if you're stripped back to your most bare kind of essence, that's, I think, still there. And then it's just so self-evident that flourishing is better than suffering. Like, that's kind of at the core of our intuition, I would say. So when you're no longer hung up on, I'm separate to you and I need this and you can't have that because it's mine, then it's just the intuition is just so simple, I think, that why not move everything in the direction of flourishing?
And certainly an important ethical principle of Buddhism is that all sentient life has value. And wherever there is sentience, consciousness, awareness, and not just in humans, but that's a valuable thing to be nurtured. Something you just said reminded me of something I should make explicit, which is just that if you ask, why are there negative, again, a theme, in the book, and I'm arguing it's a theme in Buddhism. That's the point. This is the importance of affect, the importance of feelings, and the subtlety with which they influence thoughts, and the fineness with which they're intertwined in thoughts. I think is something that psychology, modern psychology, is more and more emphasizing. And I argue that Buddhism has emphasized it for a long, long time. Buddhist psychology has long recognized the subtle ways in which feelings influence thoughts. And, if you ask, what are feelings here for? At one level, it's hard to answer because of the very opaqueness of the mind-body problem and the the difficulty of explaining why there is subjective experience at all. But leaving that aside, and just taking it for granted that there is this correspondence between behavior and subjective experience, one correspondence is feelings of aversion make you want to get away from things or change the situation, and feelings of attraction makes you want to approach the things and like do business with them or eat them or something, right? And so, and we see this in the simplest forms of life, that they can react to things with attraction or aversion. They can try to get away from them. They can try to approach them. And apparently, you know, what good and bad feelings respectively correspond to is just this fundamental behavioral dichotomy. Is this something that your genes want you to get closer to or further away from, you know? And you see it in crude form in simple organisms, and then you see it in much more complex form in us, where, you know, you have complex emotions that consist of both good feelings and bad feelings, you know, and so on. But what remains the same, I think, all the way up the kind of evolutionary ladder, if I could be so politically incorrect as to suggest that human beings are in some sense more highly developed than bacteria, is that feelings are always judgments about whether something is good or bad from the point of view of the organism. And the judgment is in the context of the question of, well, what will get the organism's genes spread? If it'll help, you have a good feeling about it. If it'll hurt, you have a bad feeling about it. And so, you know, and this is the reason that I think feelings are not reliable guides to moral truth, although we take them as if they were, right? They're reliable guides to the kinds of things that got our ancestors' genes in the next generation. But we know for a fact that those things included killing other people and probably rape and all other kinds of horrible things, right? So the question of what has succeeded in getting genes into the next generation in the past is just not the same as what is good or bad in a moral sense. And yet our intuitions about what's good and bad in a moral sense often are subordinate to these feelings, and so implicitly subordinate to this kind of Darwinian agenda. And that's, you know, that's probably all at a pretty abstract level, but I think that's an important part of the connection I'm arguing there is between kind of, you know, Darwinism, the theory of natural selection, and Buddhism.
Yeah, I think it's crucial to emphasize that, right? That Darwinian evolution is useful for understanding why we are the way we are, but it's not a prescription for it's natural, therefore it's good. You know, we weren't programmed to be kind of everything in evolution should be.
Yeah, it's not that. And moreover, it can help us understand specific ways in which our moral intuitions are perhaps not to be trusted. I mean, for example, we now have a pretty clear idea of why the intuition that retribution is good exists, right? It's a very common human intuition found in all cultures, so far as I know, that justice has been served when bad deeds should be are punished and good deeds are rewarded. And on the one hand, I think that those are actually often healthy patterns that as a practical matter, making people pay something for antisocial behavior and rewarding them for pro-social behavior can make sense as a way to set up a society. But the intuition that some higher, you know, some up there in heaven, some you know, scales of justice have been righted when we execute a killer or something, I think we now have an idea of where that intuition comes from. And I think that gives us cause to reflect on whether we should always obey it. So I think, you know, evolutionary psychology can be valuable in that way.